I always thought I was good at reading people. As a narrator, as someone who listens for a living, as a woman who has learned to measure a room before stepping into it, I believed I could sense intention long before words were spoken. I was wrong. The night they walked in, everything I knew about reading people slipped through my fingers like smoke. It began with the door opening. 3 older men stepped inside. Not loud, not attention-seeking, just present in that quiet, deliberate way certain people are. Their ages showed, but not in the hesitant way I expected. Instead, their years seemed to study them, anchor them, give them a kind of focus younger men often try to imitate. I told myself the evening would be simple. Brief conversation, polite nods, nothing more. A few cordial moments, and then they'd settle into the night. But the way they looked at me was different. Measured, assessing as though they were reading me instead. The first to catch my attention was Thomas Hall. Tall, steady, built like someone who rarely raised his voice because he rarely needed to. He stood close enough to block the hallway light, casting me into a calm shadow that felt strangely grounding. His presence didn't press. It settled. Like he knew exactly how things would unfold and saw no need to hurry. Then there was Victor Langford. He didn't rush either, but he wasted no time. His voice merged into the conversation effortlessly, guiding the moment forward with a confidence that didn't need volume. When he spoke, the room tightened its focus without him ever asking for it. There was direction in everything he did. A steadiness, yes, but a firm one, like he had spent his whole life leading without fanfare. And then Rowan Ellis. He didn't speak at first. He didn't even step too close, but his silence was the loudest thing in the room. He lingered at the edge of my attention, just near enough for me to sense him. Watching, calculating, waiting for a moment only he seemed able to recognize. Every time I turned, he was there. Not invading, not hovering, just precisely present. I expected them to warm into the evening gradually, loosen their posture, grow casual with time. Instead, the air shifted. It thickened with a tension that wasn't confrontational, but deliberate. Their eyes didn't drift. Their focus didn't flicker. 3 different energies, 3 different kinds of pressure, and all of them directed at me. Thomas leaned in slightly, speaking in a tone so calm it left no space for uncertainty. Victor brushed the edges of my thoughts with a quiet comment that felt intentionally placed. And silent, patient Rowan stepped just close enough to change the shape of the room. I wasn't surrounded physically, but emotionally, psychologically, completely. And that was when I realized the night wasn't going to move at my pace. I waited for one of them to soften, to pull back, to give me the space I assumed age would teach a man to offer. Nothing of the sort happened. Instead, they settled more deeply into themselves. Thomas remained unwavering. His presence like a wall I didn't realize I'd leaned against until I felt how solid it was. His steadiness grew heavier, more rooted. Every breath he took was even, measured, while mine came tight and uneven. Victor stayed focused, relentlessly so. He didn't push, he didn't prod. But his attention was locked onto me with a certainty that felt like being guided by invisible hands. He watched not like someone scanning a room, but like someone tracking a single point with unwavering purpose. And Rowan finally moved. Slow, intentional movements. Not sudden, not loud. He erased the distance between us with the kind of precision that suggested he had waited very deliberately for the exact second to do it. He didn't speak much, but when he finally did, his voice slid into the moment with a weight that tightened something deep inside. He spoke like a man who rarely needed more than a few words to shift the entire atmosphere. 3 different pressures, all working at once. Thomas's calm that didn't break. Victor's guiding focus. Rowan's perfectly timed presence. I tried to breathe evenly, to find room between them, to reassert control of the night, but every time I found a sliver of distance, one of them closed it again. Not physically, but with presence alone. I thought their age meant they would be the first to slow, to loosen, to tire. Instead, they showed the opposite. Not youthful energy, not eagerness, not adrenaline, but endurance. Steady, measured, unshakable endurance. The kind built over years, not days, minutes stretched. My certainty cracked at the edges. I kept searching for the moment one of them would finally step back, but none of them did. And that was when I knew I hadn't misjudged them a little. I had misjudged them completely. I kept waiting for the inevitable slowdown. 3 older men, all composed in their own ways. Surely one of them would ease first. A shift in posture, a glance at the clock, a sound that came too sharp. Something, anything. Yet the longer the night stretched, the more obvious it became they weren't fading. They were settling in. Thomas remained a pillar, silent, steady, unmovable. He stood in front of me with a presence that felt almost structural, as if the room leaned on him the same way I accidentally did. Whenever my thoughts scattered or my voice wavered, his calm steadied me, not with words, but with sheer constancy. Victor beside me was no softer. If anything, he became more deliberate. His tone shifted subtly, growing further assured. He didn't guide for the sake of control. He guided because he knew I needed grounding even when I didn't. Every word from him carried a kind of quiet authority, forged from years of understanding what it meant to stay composed when others faltered. And Rowan became the sharpest of all. Still not talkative, still not loud, but his timing was relentless. He waited until I found a sliver of stability, then stepped back into the moment with a sentence, a shift, just enough to pull me deeper again. His silence wasn't absence. It was pressure applied with microscopic accuracy. Together, they created something I couldn't track, couldn't predict, couldn't escape. Thomas caught me when I staggered emotionally. Victor steadied me when my thoughts slipped sideways. Rowan closed the gaps I didn't even realize I'd left open. 3 different rhythms all circling one center, me, and none of them breaking. I tried to read them again to search for fatigue, restlessness, hesitation, but all I saw was experience shaped into endurance. Older men weren't slower, I realized. Not these 3. They were concentrated, efficient, intentional. The night deepened and the room shifted into that late-hour hush where time stretches thin. Even the faint sound from the wall clock softened. The edges of the space blurred, warmed by the glow of a single lamp on the table. Yet the intensity never relented. Their patience wasn't restraint. It was a kind of strength that had been honed through years of knowing themselves, their limits, and how to navigate moments without rushing or retreating. My breath came shallow, uneven. Their focus didn't waver when my resolve cracked. Thomas steadied me with a quiet, grounding tone, just enough to hold me in place. When my thoughts drifted into the edges of panic, Victor brought me back with a few carefully chosen words. And Rowan, always Rowan, hovered at the fringes, stepping forward exactly when I thought I'd found a pause. It was overwhelming. Not because they pushed, but because they refused to falter. Every time I thought I understood their rhythm, they shifted. Every time I braced for a decline, they rose to meet the moment again. Minutes became an hour. An hour became 2. I lost track of how many times I searched for the dip that never came. I told myself I could step back if I wanted to, take a pause, let the night go quiet. But every time I pictured distance, something inside me resisted it, because they weren't impatient. They weren't demanding. They were simply present, unwaveringly present. And something about that presence kept drawing me in again and again. The windows fogged at the edges, blurring the darkened city beyond. The lamp's warm gold softened their faces into something almost cinematic. Lines shaped not by age, but by stories, histories, decades of learning how to remain composed under pressure. Still, I searched for signs they were reaching their limit. Shoulders loosening, a glance that betrayed fatigue. But instead I saw a quiet brightness, a second wind, or perhaps a depth of endurance I had never witnessed before. A kind of internal steadiness that didn't announce itself, but refused to fade. When I faltered again, Thomas was there, solid, grounding, dependable. When my voice caught, Victor steadied it with his own. When I braced for the end, Rowan showed me there was still more room. It should have intimidated me. Instead, it felt like being carried by a current. I didn't need to fight. At some point, the black outside the windows softened into charcoal, then into the faintest suggestion of blue. Dawn was creeping toward us quietly. I didn't notice until Rowan handed me a glass of water, slowly, gently, and waited until I took a sip, his expression unreadable but strangely tender. The coolness steadied my throat, the tremor within. The night wasn't ending yet. Not for them. Not even for me. But something was shifting. The next wave of intensity. It felt like a final chapter. Not rushed, not forced, not abrupt. Just arriving. I sensed it in the tightening of my breath, the warmth rising along my spine. The men didn't look to the window. They didn't acknowledge the creeping daylight. Their focus remained locked, unbroken, as if morning had nothing to do with them. I had spent the whole night assuming they would slow, but by then, the truth was painfully clear. It wasn't about when they would stop. It was about when I would. The realization hit me in a wave that stole my balance. A shiver ran through me. Unstoppable. Undeniable. My breath caught, broke, and refused to settle again. Thomas steadied me with a quiet murmur. Victor's tone softened just enough to feel like reassurance. Rowan stepped closer, lending me his calm like a borrowed certainty. And in that moment, it wasn't them who yielded. It was me. The gray outside the window brightened into honest morning. The room looked lived in, softened, transformed by the hours we had carved out of the night. I stood there with 3 men I had underestimated from the moment they walked in. Men who had proved me wrong without ever raising their voices. I had entered the night believing I would outlast them. I left knowing I had matched them only until the moment I couldn't anymore. By sunrise, it wasn't they who stopped. It was me. That was my night. And now that you've heard it, tell me honestly. If you had been there, how long do you think you would have lasted?